ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the world really come?
Journey, and who are you? Tell us about you.
Clinton Norman, Southern born and raised. I'm just a regular guy. I just like making people laugh because in today's world, at least, we need it. So I try not to take life too serious. Unfortunately, with the way the current state of the world is, we don't have a choice. But I like to be the comedic relief when possible. Politically, I think I'm a little hard to define. I can agree with centrist, but I'm more of a conservative, anarchist, leave me alone libertarian-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I can't call myself a Republican in the way it's defined today. I think Lincoln would roll over in his grave wholeheartedly. And but I am definitely a conservative. I am definitely a constitutionalist. So I lean that way. But I didn't come from that. I was raised uber poor like a lot of people. And in Little Rock in the 90s, you had Bill and Hillary Clinton from governor to president. And I always thought I was a Democrat through and through until I went to prison and met a bunch of lifers and should have been lifers. And that's when they start teaching you and you start listening. And you're like, I'm not a Democrat at all. And it still took until 9/11 for me to start opening my eyes to where we are in the world, So, I would like to say that it's an honor to be on your show. Thank you so much for choosing me, honestly. So,
that's extremely flattering that you would say that. Yeah, I genuinely liked your perspective. The video specifically that I saw first of yours was you commenting on a transgender teacher talking to their students. I'm sure that's how, that's that's the one that went viral, or one of the ones that went viral.
Yes.
And the fact that you introduced it with, I'm so grateful that you could be so open and openly yourself.
Yes.
The whole dynamic of the conversation with that one statement, and then just said, but look, they're little children. That's just not at their level. They should be learning math, academic subjects, not our new esoteric version of gender we're just sort of trying to absorb as a society right now, that we're still debating and is still very ill-defined. Like that is where I think the average American is at, and we feel like we're not I'm putting myself here because I totally agree. We're not represented really in the discussion. It's either sort of mocking people in that position and being kind of cold-hearted and a bastard, or it's placating to that person and pandering to a point where you're not thinking anymore, not even considering the costs to other people of, all of
and
this.
And it's a thin line.
It is a challenge when you not only are, influencing people's kids, but also just young people who have identity. They're creating an identity. They don't have one. They're sort of creating a weird version of it when they're young, and then they challenge that layer upon layer as they get older. But that's a process, our brains aren't even fully developed till 18 for women and, 25 for men, 27 for some of us.
42.
I'm 27 now, so yeah, there you go. We're all working on it. But anywho, I really feel like we're, to use the man's phrase, we're the silent majority, just sort of the common sense average Americans that are both compassionate and dutiful and care about American values, but understand like there's a modern, version of it, so to speak. I think, like, I believe, now that I'm going to get a little deep here, but I believe America's founding was the number 2 on the totem pole telling the number 1 to go stuff it. And then number 3 told number 2, and then number 4 told number 3. And that was it was landowning noble whites, and then it was non-landowning whites, and then it was blacks and whites, but only males. Then it was women, and then now we're like, hey, the transgenders need to have their gender-neutral bathrooms and like have their representation, and society's coming to this crescendo of the individual citizen equal before the law sort of being realized. That's what it's all about. That's what America is about. And even the people that disagree with that being sort of what America is about, they can't disagree with the idea that that's what we judge ourselves over the most. And I think that is the best reflection of our values, is what we judge ourselves against. Racist is one of the worst things you can call anyone other than Trump supporter. And they're one and the same for most people. So it's that's how we judge ourselves, because those are our values. And so this average American that's just sort of sitting here like, what is going on with this crazy world, is just kind of like sitting there like, what the heck? So so that voice matters, I think, more than any other voice at this moment, because it's easy when you're an extremist and you're always angry to be loud and aggressive and dominate the conversation, but those are not necessarily the majority.
We all want to be heard, but we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we're in this proponent right now, though, with I'm making a video on it right now, as a matter of fact, that at the turn of the 1900s, men had the ability to call up and have their wives put into a mental institution, right? The vapors. She's just not fulfilling her duty. And that woman would have to fight for her sanity. And everything she said, the doctor would just say, well, that's what a crazy person would say. And we're in that again today with the word racism. You can just throw that at a wall, and no matter what you say, that's what a racist would say. And it's so it's so crazy right now to even to even consider the level of racism that's being projected upon us. If we turned off our TVs, I guarantee you the racism would go away, because it's not like that. Have you seen it personally in your streets? I haven't, and I live in the South. The racism isn't as deep as the media and the politicians tell you that it is. We're not all kumbaya, but we're not all in the streets marching with a line in the sand. It's ridiculous.
I've had a couple of people on my podcast that can kind of illuminate, or no, one person that was on my podcast, he lives in Huntsville, Alabama. Where he grew up, both his parents grew up around there too. So he's been there his life. He knows the stories, and he understands, like, yeah, that exists, but it's, a fraction of the actual population, and doesn't represent any political will or party or momentum really anywhere. And then I worked in a freezer warehouse in Stockton, California. That's where I'm living currently. Very diverse town, side by side with men of all colors, Hispanic, white, black, couple Indian, a couple Asian. We were all in there, and like, we're just working side by side, totally cool. And that honestly, like, there was a couple of white guys that would, because of where they grew up and what was normal for them, dropped N-words around the black dudes, and the black dudes didn't care, because it was N-I-G-G-A, it was nigga, and it wasn't directed at anyone. It was just the slang in the proper context at work, just BSing. And that's where, especially people under 40, under 50, probably even under 60 at this point, because of the way younger population affects the older population, we're not racist. We are fearful. There's some weird sort of ignorant, you don't know how you sound things. And there's a philosophy, I believe firmly in the philosophy of individualism, and it's not automatic that your speech reflects that philosophy. It's very easy to get caught up in group speech and talking about groups as this or that, or, this, and it goes both ways. And there's a certain amount of that that's fair game and funny, making fun of white crackers, or making fun of, whatever it might be. My former boss was a Mexican dude and lived in San Diego and TJ. And, that was pretty much 90% of our comedic material was our races, and just making fun of all kinds of stuff. And that's where the modern generation, modern America is really at. It's not a joke when it's serious, because F those people, but it's mostly a joke because we're past it. And the people that are there's momentum, there's political will, and then there's just the stupidity that comes with politics that's keeping this whole debate alive. Because people on the left will believe that right-wingers basically think there's no racism in America, and then right-wingers will think that most left-wingers think racism dominates every aspect and detail and nook and cranny of America, and that's not true either. And most of it's about policy and about underlying, issues that we're all sharing. Even the police brutality one, there's that video I've asked many, many people, and they all saw it, of that old man getting shoved by the NYPD SWAT during the riots in 2020, and he had his skull cracked open and bled out of his skull and ended up dying. So that's an old white guy. That's not a race. It was a big buff white SWAT officer against a little skinny old white guy. There's no racism there, but there's clearly a problem there. And that
I ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the word, Billy?